But Leyenda here in the chat just commented earlier on one of my videos saying, can you define or really kind of define what it means to deconstruct something? What is deconstruction in terms of these stories? Because I talk about that a lot, right? It's kind of one of the watchwords on my channel. Stop deconstructing our heroes. That's a mantra around here. And ever since I made videos like that, I would receive the occasional comments saying, well, deconstruction isn't always a bad thing, this and that. And I think it's a term that we would do well to specifically define, what it means and specifically what we mean by it when applied to stories and heroes. Because on the one hand, there is an okay type of deconstruction in the right context with the right, stories, characters, and so forth. I'm going to come at this topic a little bit different here. To understand deconstruction, first, let's think of the literal meaning of the word, right? Well, if you construct something, a building is constructed. Well, to deconstruct it would be to take it down, right? But deconstruction is very different than, slamming a wrecking ball into it and clearing away the clutter. That's demolishing. That's not deconstruction. And once I develop this analogy a little bit, this metaphor, we'll come back to that, because the problem is that a lot of people who approach a hero or a story or whatever, they say they're just deconstructing, but they're really demolishing with a vengeance. But to deconstruct would not be to slam the wrecking ball into the building. To deconstruct would be taking off the coat of paint, then removing the cement or the grout or whatever, then taking down each block one by one, in the order that it was placed up, deconstructing, undoing the specific construction. That would be to deconstruct something. And that's done, right? I mean, at times, think about some of the people in the Gilded Age, late 1800s and whatnot, who would have castles deconstructed over in Europe, old world Scottish castles or whatever, and shipped over to the United States so that they could rebuild them and have an old world European castle or whatever, on as their new mansion or something like that. That kind of thing's done. So that's what it means to deconstruct. Now, what does that mean in terms of a story? Demolishing a character is a problem. You don't want to do that, or demolishing a story, if a story has meant something to people. So in one sense, we're going to use a couple examples here from recent history. The Last Jedi was not even a deconstruction of Luke Skywalker. That was a demolishment. That was a demolishing. That was a let's take this character that everyone has associated with these values, and let's just make sure that we know that he's not associated with those values anymore. He's not aspirational. He's not somebody who would always believe in the good, because see, he didn't believe in the good. So a lot of people calling that something that like The Last Jedi did, or even Rise of Skywalker continued to do to Luke Skywalker, they're trying to call that a deconstruction. That's actually a demolishing. They demolished that character. There was no deconstruction about it. There was no careful taking apart. So what does it mean, or how do you parse out when there's a good deconstruction and when there's a bad deconstruction? I'll give you an example of a good deconstruction. We'll use Frank Miller as an example of a number of different good and bad examples here, are illustrations of how to do this. Think about when Frank Miller wrote the Daredevil, Man Without Fear, or even Batman Year One. That was a deconstruction, a good deconstruction, because the point of deconstruction is to put it back together. You can't have a deconstruct if you if you deconstruct something and never put it back together, then that's a demolishment. Rian Johnson did not want to put Luke Skywalker back together. J.J. Abrams' very feeble attempt to put him back together in Rise of Skywalker didn't work either. And that's because of what I've been saying on my channel. You can't take an aspirational archetype and have them just go through a little rough patch, but now they're aspirational again, or this is how they learn to be aspirational. No, that's not the archetype. That's a complete misunderstanding of that. So if you want to say something was a valid or a good deconstruction of a character or a story, the first point is it has to have put the things back together. It has to have reconstructed it afterwards stronger, as a stronger structure. To a degree, you can introduce some new elements into it, But you can only go so far with that. Let's think about the wealthy person in the Gilded Age here who has a castle, like medieval castle in Scotland, deconstructed and shipped over to the New World in the United States. And let's say instead of rebuilding that castle, they build this Art Deco, weird kind of new modernist mansion. Now you might say, well, what's wrong with that? I like Art Deco. Hey, I like Art Deco too. What's wrong with that though is you killed a castle. You took something beautiful that's no longer in the world now, just so you could build that new thing, which didn't have to be done. You didn't have to kill the old castle, deconstruct that, and demolish that in order to build your new Art Deco thing or whatever. You could have built that with any materials you wanted. So that's the problem. So that's the answer when people say things like, well, what about me? What's wrong? I like the Snyder Batman. I think the Snyder Batman's amazing. That's no justification. The fact that you like that doesn't mean that should have been done or that's the right thing to be done, because in creating the Zack Snyder Batman, who kills, who's brutal, who's all these things, you've taken away the old Batman. That can't be a thing anymore in the cinematic universe right now or whatever, because you've taken that out just to create this new thing that you wanted. There are any number of pre-existing anti-heroes we talked about, and you can go create your own new one or whatever. But you've taken something out of the world that was serving a purpose in the story, in the mythology world here in terms of characters. You've taken something out that was serving a purpose just so you can rebuild your new thing with some of the materials, but you didn't need to use those materials, So that's one example of a deconstruction gone wrong. But getting back to my deconstruction done right, with these examples, you'll note that it's only ever really justifiable or ending in a good result when it's done under responsible and strong editorial oversight. What I mean by that is editors who actually do understand and care for the characters and are making sure you don't muck up things too much. And it's done within and to fit a continuity, a pre-established continuity. So something like the Daredevil Man with No Fear, the original Daredevil comics were great, but that era of comics didn't go quite as deep into the characters' psychologies. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't at all. Don't get mad at me. Stan Lee was, Spider-Man from his initial creation was a wonderful character with a lot of depth and things going on in his mind, as was Matt Murdock. But as his stories progressed, there's a not maturity. What's the word I want to say? An intricacy, another level to interiority of characters, a level of psychological realism, not realism in the universe. We're dealing with a guy who gets magical powers, not magical, but mystical powers. As he's once he's blinded, he gets these chemical powers or whatever to heighten ability. So we're not dealing with realism like that. But you took a character and really investigated. Man Without Fear investigated kind of what makes Matt Murdock the character that he already is. What makes him tick? And so you gave some reasons for that and everything, and that's fine. Batman Year One is another great example, because Batman Year One, Batman was created to be who he was, this character who doesn't kill, this vigilante because he's against a corrupt government, but not a vigilante who's just out to do his own thing as an anti-hero or anything. But the question is that Frank Miller was answering with that Year One, what would it have looked like when Batman first came on the scene? One of the principles that was kind of established in comics was the fact that the presence of Batman is what inspires the supervillains, the villains with the gimmicks, and the villains trying to go over the top theatrically as well, because Batman had come out with this persona and to scare the common criminals. But the idea is that kind of escalated and inspired some villains to become the super villains, So what's the transformation period look like there? How do we go from Batman putting the smackdown on gangs and a kind of old world mafia type criminals in Gotham City, and how did that look? Did he officially end that? We've got really great area for story there that can be delved into. And the deconstruction there isn't so much deconstructing Batman's psyche as deconstructing this little part of his history. We just see it as a block that's already prefabbed in the structure of the Batman mythos. So we take that block out and we dissect that block, we deconstruct that block, take all the parts out, and have a better understanding of it, and you infuse it with a lot more detail, a lot more growth, consequences, character progression, and all of that, then you've got a stronger block. This year one Batman, it's a stronger block now that you can plug back into the greater continuity of the Batman structure. And it was wonderful. And because we had that, because Frank Miller did that, again, making sure it had to go into the continuity of Batman's pre-established structure there, and he had editorial oversight, so he didn't get to go crazy and do the nonsense he did later. Because he had that new stronger block in the foundation of the Batman structure, then you had people like Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale able to come on top of that and do these amazing deconstruction / reconstruction stories of their own, like The Long Halloween. Let's talk about Harvey Dent, and really delve into what made him become Two-Face, and then Dark Victory, Haunted Victory, or Dark Victory, Haunted Night and Dark Victory. Yeah, let's talk about Robin. Dick Grayson, first becoming Robin. So the really great story. So if you start to do a healthy deconstruction in which you reconstruct it in a stronger way, honoring the great structure anyway, not trying to change it or anything, that's a great thing. So Batman Year One's an example of a wonderful deconstruction, and it didn't have to deconstruct the character so much, just the story. So that's an example of a good deconstruction.